And
yeah,
thank
if
you for
you'd
having
like to
us.
go ahead and do what we talked earlier. A few people, Phil Bain, he's with us today. Rick Eisenhower, has some customers and some Case IH employees that reps and product knowledge.
Now, you guys Bain started in 1967, correct? And then how has that changed a little bit? Obviously, agriculture has changed since the late 60s and early 70s, but how does that change maybe the implement dealership and the feel of how you guys work with your farmers and work with them to be able to provide services for them?
Yeah.
I have donut in my mouth.
Well, probably we're more integrated today than we ever have been in their operation. Like, what Kyle was saying, we have field industry reps that, deal with tillage, planting, especially reps for sprayers, for tractors, for combines, and really partner up with them, the customer base. We feel like, and we've been told by customers, we're a big part of their operation and making them and helping them be profitable and stay on the cutting edge with whether it be electronics or actual iron. That's probably a change over time to becoming a real partner in their organization. We've got a customer here that can probably decipher that even better to what it means to him and his daily operation and his annual purchases and things like that go into what makes him the best agronomic farmer that he can be. So,
How much does the technology change what you guys do? When you look at somebody that works even in repairs or service, does that change the makeup of agriculture in the industry, whether it's for folks that are coming in?
I think the biggest thing with Bain equipment, we put a precision farming specialist, which is my role here. That's all we do is sell, install, and service just the technology. So for a company to invest as much money as they do in one person in each location and two at one store, I mean that's where the market is right now. That's where the benefits and the fuel savings is coming from. It's from all the technology. So that's why we have to have that person in the store. So.
Phil, any comments from you?
I was just thinking about the 1967 question, actually. At that time, we originated in Montgomery County, which Crawfordsville is county seat. There were 7 implement dealers in the county at that point in time, and now there's 3 left. But as you expand that throughout the state, the services required of a dealership are greatly more expected today than they ever were before, because there just aren't as many of us. So, the farmers have gotten bigger and they expect more. And I would too if I were farming 10,000 acres or 5,000, or if I were farming 500, I would expect good service. So, that's what goes with this whole operation is service. You don't have that, don't have the support to keep the technology going, it's basically an empty ship. So.
And it all comes back down then to the farmer, which is some of the things that we're going to talk a little bit about today, and being able to address issues. And Brad is with Risk Management and
Ag Producers Insurance.
And Ag Producers Insurance. I just forget the insurance part of it, I'm sorry. And drove down from the Lafayette area to join us today. And we're going to talk focus first a little bit about crop insurance. And if you want to give a little bit of your background and what you do with Risk Management and Ag Producers.
We're a commodity brokerage firm. Risk Management Commodities is a commodity brokerage firm based out of Lafayette that started back in 2001. It's actually, the partners in it are a couple farmers. One farm's he's upwards of 8,000-9,000 acres in Tippecanoe, Montgomery, Fountain, and Clinton counties. And then the other partner, he farms in southern Illinois, Hudsonville area. He farms about 2,500 acres. And then the other partner that we have in the firm, his dad was on the Board of Trade for about 35 years and had a seat up there. So he brings a lot of knowledge from the technical side, and then we got the two farmers that can bring knowledge from the fundamental side of things when it comes to looking at markets. Also in-house is we have Ag Producers Insurance, which is a crop insurance, and then also a property and casualty firm that specializes in agriculture insurance, farm insurance mainly. I'm the only one in the office that actually has a Series 3 license to do commodity trading, and then I also have my license to do crop insurance and then property and casualty insurance. So obviously that keeps me extremely busy. What we also have in the office, Rick, you mentioned about service. One of the things they created about 2-3 years ago was they brought in a agronomist that has a consulting firm who has clients in Illinois, Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio, and he helps them with making their agronomy decisions, whether it be seed, chemicals, and then also one of the other partners at farms, they created a buying group. Think of it like a co-op that doesn't pay dividends, but basically it's member-driven organization that uses the power of members to purchase things at a wholesale price and then pass on those savings onto the farmers that are part of the buying group. And we got farmers in the buying group that are from all over the country. Actually, I think they just said they picked up one in Texas that's going to be working with us now. But we actually have, I think they did at one time, but I think with how things are going, Case is actually involved with the buying group. Obviously, they've tried to get that other color to come, but they refuse to. But they work with various seed companies from AgriGold to, I believe, Specialties involved. But they work, and then they also buy chemicals. And now they're actually going to build a physical plant in Logansport where they're going to handle dry and liquid fertilizer and chemicals up there for the members of the buying group. So what that gives us is, as I mentioned before, Rick, you mentioned that service aspect of it. It gives us a good, broad understanding of everything from agronomy on what's going on a farming's operation, and that helps us on the crop insurance side because we can understand what guys are fighting with and putting up with when it comes to agronomy and what our agronomist is seeing out there because they do soil tests during the summer, and then also on the insurance side as well as the commodity side. So if a farmer called in to talk to us, I mean, we could talk about a lot of things, from agronomy to insurance to the markets, all in one conversation. So that gives us a unique advantage when it comes to working with our farmers and helping them make the best decisions for their farming operation.
And crop insurance, which is what we're going to talk about
Yep.
today. Brad, as we get into a year like 2013, we had kind of a rough start, lots of moisture, lots of delays, getting things done. Complete opposite problem that we had in 2012. What are some of the big things that we need to look at in terms of crop insurance this year, and things that maybe we need to be on the lookout for as we look at our programs and what we have?
First and foremost is one thing that guys have just finished doing is certifying their acres to their crop insurance agents. You have to give your acres and the number of acres in the crop and then the plant date for your crop insurance. Those will have a schedule of insurance generated, and producers need to look over those schedules of insurance very carefully. If there's acres that are off or crop that is off or even the plant date's off, it could have gotten keyed wrong by either myself as the agent or our processors in underwriting. These are correctable errors. Make sure you look at that. Make sure you look over that schedule of insurance. When you get it in the mail or if you email it, we do both, look it over. Look it over carefully and make sure all the acres match up, everything looks right, and communicate that to your agent. And the agent should be calling you and saying, hey, I've just sent you the schedule of insurance. Is there any issues on it? Let's go over it. Let's make sure it's correct. Right now, to be perfectly honest with you, driving over here, and I was over in Ohio, crop here in Indiana, Ohio looks really good. But that's just road farming. And our agronomist, he said that from what he's seen, he's been seeing some pretty good stuff too. But with it being a wet spring, there's that concern out there of toxin issues come this harvest. And one thing that guys may need to remember is that it needs to be measured out in the field before it goes into the bin or before it goes to the elevator and gets sold. Make sure you have it checked, or if you have any concern over it, contact your agent and have them either send a claims adjuster out there, or just be aware of it.
Brad, as we talk about crop insurance for this year, is it too early to start thinking about 2014? And if it's not, what do we need to know to make sure we're putting the right coverage on the farm? Because the hail issue, and you have to make, for example, as I talked to farmers around the state, I had a gentleman tell me that they have coverage for this, but then they didn't include green snap, and now there's issues from the hail. So how do we make sure we've got the right coverage for our operations?
That just comes down to a conversation with your agent and who you work with. Hail insurance, which includes your green snap, you can purchase at any time. Whereas with crop insurance, you have a sales closing date for corn and soybeans was March 15th. Now wheat, you can start looking at making decisions. It's tough to really look at what coverage to choose for your corn and soybeans, because we still got to go through the harvest price discovery period, and then we also will have to go through for 2014 the spring discovery price, which will happen in February. But that can't stop you from at least looking at what your revenue guarantee per acre is going to be, and then also possibly looking at what you need to yield for this year that could trigger a claim. Because with where we're at last year at this time, given what we were looking at last year, the price of corn as of July 23rd, the closing price of December corn was $7.85. Right now we're at $5, or right there at $5. You're talking a $2.85 difference between last year and now. So last year you had production losses. This year you could be looking at, with a spring price of $5.65, and if things do look better, you could be looking at a revenue loss instead of a production loss. And that's what guys sometimes get confused about. I can't tell you how many times I work with guys and they say, well, that's not going to trigger a claim. It's like, no, it's not on the production side or on the yield side, but it could on the revenue side. So you need to look at what your revenue might be. I know, for example, like one of the calculations I did, if you had a 170 APH yield, and if you had 85% coverage, you would have to yield above 181 not to trigger a claim. I had some guys that have such a good APH that they would have to yield above 200 bushels per acre not to trigger a revenue claim if we went, and that's if we went to 450. So that's one thing that guys need to start looking into is will this affect me, and what is my cutoff point of where I might trigger a claim. So if you got a 170 and you get a 180, which most guys would take a 180 to be perfectly honest with you, you very easily could have a revenue claim if we hit that 450 level. And there's some people in the markets that think we could. I think that's what guys need to be looking at right now. Is 2014 is probably a little too early. Wheat, you know, start be looking at that as well too, because the wheat price is $8.57 and the current price is $6.68. So you're close to $2 below that, and that could trigger a claim as well too on the revenue side.
Like any part, I think, of any business relationships, whether it's service or being able to communicate with your customers, how important is that for the farmer and for the insurance agent as well, to make sure that you have the right coverage and you have the right options available and you're addressing the issues on your farm?
Oh, I think the key is just to be proactive. A perfect example is I was coming back from Ohio after meeting with one of my customers over there and hit a nasty thunderstorm. I gave him a call the next morning. I said, I know that storm came through. Did you have any damage? And he said, well, believe it or not, I did not. And by the time we hung up the phone, he said, I appreciate that call. You know, it's one of those things where you just got to be proactive, but it's also a two-way street. I mean, crop insurance can get a little bit confusing, to be perfectly honest with you, with all the different coverages and all the different formulas. But, it goes back to the farmer making sure that he looks at that schedule of insurance and making sure he knows what he has and what the insurance is saying that he has, and making sure that's correct, because there is that option to go in there and revise it and make sure it's correct. So it's a two-way street as well. I mean, it comes to, and that's on the property and casualty side as well too. You know, I talk to other agents and they say, I always hate it when a guy says, oh yeah, by the way, I bought this equipment 6 months ago, and it's like, so it's a two-way street. Make sure you're communicating with your agent on what's going on in your farm. And then it's one of those also other things. I work with guys on the marketing side that I'm trying to talk to them on a weekly basis, or at least get touch base with them every couple of weeks. And you know, it's one of those things where I just, if they're not marketing but they're a crop insurance customer, I contact them as well just to say, hey, what's going on and how's things looking? Do I need to be prepared? And text messaging is a great thing too. I can text my farmers, like especially during this past spring. A couple guys I knew were in a wet area. I texted, will you have any prevent plant? And they said, let's hope not. So
I think there's a lot of hoping for that. I know across parts of the Corn Belt. I'm going to say this is the tough question for last. We're going to talk a little Farm Bill. And I know it you think about it, and one of the questions I always ask farmers is, how does this directly affect you? Is it a major concern, or are we talking about it too much? But in terms of crop insurance, and we've seen cut after cut after cut when it comes to the budget issues and figuring out a way to trim the fat, what does that mean for crop insurance as it is now? And what happens if we don't get a Farm Bill conferenced and pushed through and signed? And what does that mean for growers in 2014 and beyond?
my understanding from the crop insurance side is if nothing happens at all and we revert back to the, I believe it's either 1947 or 1949 Farm Bill. If this current CR, continuing resolution, expires September 30th without anything being done, the Farm Bill reverts back to that 1947-49. Crop insurance is in place for 2014. The question that everybody has is how much funding are they going to give it when it comes to the Farm Bill, because the Farm Bill funds crop insurance. Reading the tea leaves from what I've talked to with my contacts with Farm Bureau and a couple other liaisons that work down at the State House, it sounds like they're lucky they're going to get it to conference by the August recess. Reading what Purdue had, and it'll be interesting to hear what Chris Hurt has to say later in the week. At you got a meeting with him tomorrow? Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
From what I've heard from what Purdue had a webinar, and what I read there is that they said there's 4 options, which actually when you read it, it's actually only 2. It's either it's going to be go to conference and they're going to get something done before the recess, or they're not going to get anything done. I'm predicting that it's going to be another continuing resolution for 1 more year, because you got 2014, and that's going to be a pretty big year to push basically us into the 2016 presidential election. I'm a little bit mixed, to be perfectly honest with you. Have you all heard about what they're trying to do out there? They're trying to split the Farm Bill with the food, from the food stamp. I'm torn on that because of the simple fact that the farm portion, the farm funding, crop insurance, and everything else is such a small portion of the Farm Bill that if you have it separate, it's one of those bills that has the least amount or not very much funding. And we all know what happens out in Congress. Those bills that don't have much funding can get kicked to the curb a lot easier than your bigger bills. So I can see the philosophy behind it that Representative Marlon Stutson was pushing hard for in the House. But at the same time, though, you almost want to keep it with the food stamp portion of it, just so that you can ensure funding. Because you know if they're going to fund the food stamp, which I'll be perfectly honest with you, that's a lot of votes. With what we're seeing in today's society, I'd rather see it be put in there with the food stamps, just because you can ensure the funding. Crop insurance, that's a good question, but it is set in place for 2014. Going back to that, if it does revert back to 1947-49, the only safety net the farmer's going to have will be crop insurance. So your acre, your sure direct payments are going to be basically gone, but crop insurance will remain in place. So and then the other question is, how much subsidy are they going to give it? So
is that a concern? That I mean, because we saw huge cuts.
I'm glad you followed up on that. My next point was, make sure farmers, you contact your representatives and your senators, your elected officials. Contact them, tell them how important crop insurance is to you. Especially mention that if they do away with crop insurance totally, if there is a disaster like we had last year with the drought, you're looking at an ad hoc disaster bill that could be much more than what they would even pay out in claims when it comes to losses. I mean, you look at stuff like was it Superstorm Sandy that hit New Jersey? Think about something, a drought of that magnitude without crop insurance. You're paying out a lot of money to help farmers recover, potentially in an ad hoc disaster bill versus what the funding would be there for claims on crop insurance.
Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me.